it illuminates something that is very difficult to see in our culture. You know, the more pernicious aspects of bias often come in the form of virtue. So, you know, this is, it's really easy to point out the alcoholic. It's really hard to point out the codependent that's keeping the system going. And so that's where I like to point, because that way we were talking about bringing everything back a layer, accountability and power and all of these things, bringing it back. So bring it back from oh, the culture did this to me, you know, and then probably it would be my family, and then it would be physical things like my health, and then it would be the next layer and would be emotional. Then it would be, you know, I'm just always sad. I'm just a sad person. Then it would be psychological, you know, that's just who I am. This is however you consider yourself or your world conceptually. And then that's when you hit the magic place, if you hit it. And that's in the energy place, where you realize, holy shit, this is so different from what I thought it was. There is no cause out there. And from there being, thank you, no cause out there, and I don't mean there are no conditions out there. I want to make that really clear. There are some pretty freaking horrific conditions. This is not denying conditions. That's not, I mean, what's that quote? The work is endless, but that doesn't excuse you from doing the work. It never stops. I mean, there's just on one block in Harlem, we could work the rest of our lives to bring it to a level where people had the natural and organic needs met in order to create human flourishing. So I want to make it really clear that it's not that there aren't conditions. It's not that our work is ever to become insensitive to the conditions, the exact opposite. But how do you get a people who are capable of doing that? That's really the question. You know, if your aim is to end suffering, the causes of suffering, and help others end suffering, how do you do that? What is the mindset that you would have to be in to do that? And how do you get people out of suffering who are just swimming in it, who are drowning in it? And what we've discovered is, you know, there's the kind of overt order to like pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you know, and that doesn't seem to work, or just say no, that version. And then there's let me pick you up by your bootstraps, and we'll build these systems for you to do it. And that doesn't seem to work either. And that's why I like Trabian Shorter's work, is he goes right down the middle. And he talks about this idea of it being about how we view things, and viewing people at the beginning as competent, capable, and strong, and able to self-realize, and this is going to be the challenging part, through any conditions. And so there's you know, it's really easy to point to that group and say they're disabling people. But what we don't realize until we hit this sort of energy or karmic level or viewpoint level is that there's a lot of insidious and invisible disabling. And that's what we have to begin to work with. We have to move it in closer so that you do what Trabian's doing. And that's where you have it be that the source of power comes back to the individual who is no longer objectified by the ideas of their social disadvantage. Does that make sense? And so all of these people, I believe they're profoundly good-hearted people, because I was one of them. Are from a very deeply caring place, identifying people as objects according to their social disadvantage, which then reifies or reinforces that social disadvantage. And you inadvertently are powerfully disabling people. And the other thing is, potentially not focusing on yourself. And I watched a very powerful, I don't have it, but not everybody likes Jordan Peterson. Not even I like Jordan Peterson sometimes. I mean, I wish that, although I feel like he has so much wisdom that it's very hard to hear. He's a multivariate thinker. I use this often in a univariate world. They just give me the cause. The only cause will kill the cause. And he's like, it's an ecology. There's many things that create this one moment, and we have to begin to look at it. And so this woman was really upset about what she referred to as climate disaster. And see, what I'm saying is, I just want to say, when you call it climate disaster, you are creating. You're creating. You have to be really careful with these things. There is definitely climate change, without question. But if you notice in your own being, the difference between the word climate disaster and how equipped you feel to face, confront, work with, alter reality, and climate change. For me, any word that has a kind of neutrality gives me an equanimity. Equanimity gives you optionality. Optionality is the capacity to move in any direction. And that's what we're interested in. Look, I don't care who you voted for. I don't care who you're going to vote for. I don't care who you love, who you hate. I don't care anything. I just want it to be that you are equipped and capable to move in a way that brings benefit in the world. That's it. And that you're connectable, because it has to be that people on both sides of the aisle, and how sad that there's only two, but both sides of the aisle who both genuinely have a hope and an intent to do good in the world. I'll choose somebody who's relatively neutral on both sides. Okay, like I genuinely believe I genuinely believe that AOC in her heart wants to do good. I genuinely believe on the other side, Tulsi Gabbard wants to do good. I believe they want to do good. I believe that they would do tenfold better if they did good together. Does that make sense? We're spending all of our money, literally, all of our resources bickering while everything is coming crumbling down. It's like we're just arguing with each other rather than really saying, okay, look, I get it. Your primary focus, your libertarian people, is freedom and autonomy. I get that. Liberty. Your focus, liberal people, is social justice and equality. These are beautiful things. I want a world where both of those occur. I tend to lean in a certain direction at various times that may be different from one or the other, one of the other schools at a particular time. But those two things, that's what we want. And so I want the best liberal thinkers in the world, the best, the finest, the most pristine, connected with the best and finest. I'm going to call them liberty thinkers, because that's one of my favorite essays on liberty. Who wrote that? John Stuart Mills on liberty. If you can read it, it's a stunning article. It is focused on how to have a culture that is rooted in genius. What a great idea. And generally, people who have the libertarian view, the original libertarian view, not the, it's definitely taken on a new flavor, but the original libertarian view, which is just free people, free markets, free speech, freedom, tend to be the creatives. You know, it's just that they have an idea that we want to, that we can create reality. Just if I'm not causing harm and you're not causing harm, we're good. And everyone just kind of stay out of my business. And then, you know, the liberal side tends to say, hey, we have a, you know, a vital imperative on our souls to help each other. And we need to figure out how to connect to do that in order to create the environment that everyone can thrive in. And both of those, I think you can have both tracks running authentically in yourself. That's genuinely what I believe. And this is where I like Brett Weinstein's idea. I had no idea what I was going to talk about today, but I like Brett Weinstein's idea for this. You know, it's we don't know if it'll work, but you know, it's the idea of you know, a third party where there's a member of each of the parties who forms the party, which I like. I like this idea. I mean, it seems to me like politics should start at the point where the people who are making the biggest decisions can figure out how to get along with each other. It should be the adult house. It shouldn't be like the nursery school where like they can't even figure out how to get along with each other. How are we going to figure out how to get along with the world? It's like start at home first. Me. Start with me. Oh, so the Jordan Peterson piece is, you know, this woman was like, what do I do? You know, climate disaster. And he basically said what all 12-step programs say. And that is you can't give away what you don't have. And so you can't begin to cure something until you have some level of self-awareness and healing within yourself. If you really, and by the way, the Dalai Lama says the same thing in different words, but it's if you really, really want to make change yourself. When you free yourself, you free everyone around you at a minimum from your opinions, which are incredibly binding. And you know, there's, I'm just going to tell you this really funny gospel. I'm going to tell you a piece of gospel from my near-death experience videos. But I love this. You know, this woman is brought to the place, and it's a place that I've now watched probably 150 of these videos. So I can tell you, they all basically go to the same place in one form or another. And they all basically have some kind of life-altering lesson. And then they all basically have a moment of saying, I don't know. And then when they say it, they get shuttled back to their body, regretting greatly that they're in their body, but knowing that they have to carry out the mission that they just saw. This isn't, I mean, every NDE across the board, that's the interesting architecture of it. There's a guy who was the original guy who studied these, and he wrote the book of architecture, of having done 1,000 interviews across the board. This is what people say. And they go to a place and they have a different kind of vision that is neutral enough, and that's what's really important, that's neutral enough to have them see, in a sense, what they've always known, which I think is an interesting way of looking at it. It's more like a remembering than it is a learning. And that remembering is almost just invariably removing the judgment on what it would mean if you thought this in some way, right? So this one woman, though, she's brought to the place where she goes through these different parts of her life, and she can see the judgment from her eyes landing on the people around her. And she can just see them get progressively deflated as that judgment from her eyes does that. And that was such a profound moment of realizing everything matters. And again, that's one of the lessons that you get in these NDEs, is that everything matters. Every thought matters, every gesture matters. We all can hear your tone when you text. We can all feel those wrestles inside. We all know, we all always know. And then because we don't clear that stuff out, then what's happening is all of us are having to live in a way that we become inured to what we know. We become, it's like, I don't want to feel, I don't see, I can point to you because I don't ever feel you judging me. So there you go. Maybe you do though. But like, oh, I don't want to feel his judgment, so I lock up. So I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that, and because everyone is just beaming this judgment and fear and anger out, and so we all get like this. Well, when you're like this, you're not nourished. So when you're not nourished, what are you? You're beaming judgment, anger, and fear out, and so it's just endless versions of that. It's got to stop somewhere. You know, these funny Instagram things where it says, you know, generational trauma ends with me. But it should be something like, you know, planetary judgment ends with me. And then, because when it does, then again, I'm going to use what's his name that I like? Bukowski quote. You know, there's something about, he talks about the feeling of being in the presence of this woman who was free. And whenever he was, you know, he felt free himself. And he said, there's something about being in the presence of free people. There's a certain kind of joy that you feel just as a result of being in their presence. It's not even anything that they do. That is the most profound politic that we can bring to the planet, is that fundamental joy. And I'll tell you why that's not the politics we're practicing, because it's hard. It is much harder for me to dismantle my judgment, my fear, my anger, my separation, than it is for me to point to those people who are doing it. But that's really just, like I say, rearranging furniture on the Titanic. That's all you're doing when you do that. So that's what I have to say. And I will say this, oh, thank you. See, that's very sweet. That I think this is so cool. This is personal, but I'm up here, so I'll say my personal thing, and that is that. Let me see if I can even play it for you. But so the first thing is that Tulsi Gabbard. Did anybody see this when she took her oath? No, it wasn't on the Bible. It was on the Bhagavad Gita. I think that's powerful. And then Jai Shri Krishna, Kash Patel. That was what he said in his opening. And you know, it's like we have a lot of ideas about what's going on, but I've never seen that before in my 57 years. And so you begin to see these other things being woven into the scene, that everything you take as normal all of a sudden is beginning to shift. So that's where we are with that. Let's see. We can do this however you want to do it. If you guys want to talk about anything at any point, any questions, any thoughts, I'm happy to do that. I seem to have this ongoing endless list of questions that come rolling in that I'm very happy to answer. I'm always happy to answer. But the problem is I talk so much that if I answer one, it's an entire session. And in the time that I answer one, 9 more come in. So, but because we have, you know, we're together, if anybody has anything you want to talk about at any point, just let me know. Good? Just anything like that. Okay. Aiden asks, what is the erotic view on asexuality? Well, the erotic view on asexuality is that there's no such thing as asexuality. There is, I mean, we are in the throes of the universe making love with itself. So we are sex. And then the question is, to what degree, what extent do you want to be part of that process? And what is the calling? The erotic view on everything is that each one of us has a blueprint within us, and that I watched this really cute little Italian guy who travels the world and asks the question, what is happiness? And he went to these Mongolian shaman and asked them. And he discovers that each culture has a different view of what happiness is. Italians, it's usually related to food, but the shaman she was beautiful when he said, she had just been in the shaman trance, and he said, what is happiness? And she just basically laughed at him like he was a fool and said, basically happiness is you discovering what happiness is, which I thought was a great answer. But the erotic view is that within each of us is encoded the blueprint of our unique karma, which is placed inside of the collective karma. See, that's the two-track existence. And that happiness, or our experience of thriving or flourishing, is based on how well you adhere to what your unique karma is. It's very simple. And how you play with it, how you interact with it, how you, I was born a woman, and this is why I like Eros. I was born a woman, and being a woman has certain benefits and certain deficits. And that's the game I was given. And so how well I play with that hand determines my happiness. It's not trying to eradicate sexism, although that's part of the game. But it's not like I'll be happy when that happens. It's how well I interact with the karma itself. It's a dance that I'm constantly in. It's an act of making love with my own karma that determines this state of flourishing. The state of flourishing, as we talked about, a dog that's meant to be jumping, that's meant to jump when it's jumping, emanates a certain radiance or joy. That certain radiance or joy, anybody who loves dogs, is contagious. You watch it and you're just like, ah, and it's like, ah, and you're in it together. That's the state that we're looking for, and what we hit when we're in alignment with our own karma, which is why I wear religion, and I love religion. I really do. I'm not what I sit in churches. I think they're beautiful. I love Tibetan Buddhism, but I wear it like a loose garment because, and I wear it in such a way that I would draw from it whatever would add to my karma. But I don't let it determine anything for me. I don't let anything determine anything for me. I am self-determining, only it's a capital S self that's behind me, that's determining even this reality. So back to asexuality. And so then, if I'm anything, non-anything, then I look at the reasons why. And is this because when you get to something that is genuine karma, it's so weird. No matter what it is, it turns you on. And I don't mean turns you on, lights you up. And each one of us has a different karma. So we're often shocked when we hit our own unique karma that it looks like most of the world doesn't have, but ours does. And we're really happy inside of it. And then there's that struggle, like, I'm just not the marrying type of gal. I'm just not. That's not my karma. That is not. In fact, I think I've probably spent a lot of lifetimes very married. I was like, remember for the next life. This doesn't look good on you, Nicole. I'm a Dakini. My purpose in this life is to be in flight. That is my purpose. And when I'm in flight, everybody is better for it. Everyone, including anybody I would possibly marry. Like, okay, I understand. That's just me. But do you know what it took? What it took, to be a woman who grew up with a mother from, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, with 50 matching sweater sets, who just so prayed that her daughter would, find the man who could and would, cook meals for every boyfriend I ever had, even when I was a punk rocker and they'd come over with dog chains on, and I just give my daughter a husband, and what it took to grow up in this culture, and what it took, and then to have that moment of, it's actually, that is not me. this is me. When I am this, we are all happier. I'm going to be this. And everyone has, we have it with everything that we do. I love Jesus. I mean, that's another one. When I discovered, I really, I just love Jesus. I love, especially Catholic Jesus. I love. I could sit in there in those pews till the cows came home with all of that incense. I love it. And I practice Tibetan Buddhism, and hear how bad Jesus is all the time. It's like, okay, I understand you feel that way, but my karma just loves that guy. And so so you're at the end of it, you're an original. That's the aim. And when you're an original, then you can really bring something to the planet. And that's what the planet is looking for. I don't think the planet is looking for, I don't know if you guys had this. Did you have ditto copies in elementary school? There were, these ditto Xerox copies. No, I don't think the world's looking for any more Xerox copies of people who are just saying the same thing. If I talk to one more CNN representative, like they heard that last night on CNN or Fox, it's like, okay, look, I want you. I want you. And the only way it happens that a person transmits the holy is if it is who they are. That's the only way, it's like we're like these stained glass windows, and you got to pull back all of the curtains of conditioning and ideas about who you should be for the light to come through with the perfect lighting that you are. And so that's what I think. So then we'll go back to asexual. So then a person not engaging in physical sexual activity is probably what you're saying. And again, my guess is you're still engaging in energetic sexual activity. And I say this because you would die if you didn't. That's why. That's why. We die. And we either die a big death or a little death. But, we all know this intuitively. And for some reason, we are in one massive collective conscious, unconscious. We're in a collective unconscious agreement that people without Eros die. And it's like we know it in movies like when Stella got her groove back, or we get like, oh, she's in this thing, she's not getting any loving, she goes out, she just spreads those legs, she gets some loving, she comes back to life. We know intuitively that that's how it works, but there's something that is just so anathema to our culture to admit. And I think it's because we have a profoundly control-based culture. So admitting that you need something that brings you out of control is a really vulnerable thing. It's profoundly vulnerable. And we talk a lot about this idea of the singularity, and we talk about it in terms of technology. But if you want to just talk about it, the human mind. Or we can talk about Gertel, but we'll just talk about the singularity, and that's that you can only build so much in a state of control. Then there's a leaping off point that you have to go into. You have to go into the unknown, and there are certain acts and practices that bring you into that unknown. But this is death. This is death. And in fact, that's why you're so desperately trying to build toward enlightenment or whatever it is, because you want to get to the place where you can finally breathe. And that's really what Eros is. So then I can say this, and I should say my judgment, so that I'm not beaming my judgment at you, and I'm being overt about it. And that's that I'm a slight skeptic. Not entirely, but in Tibetan practices, they have very profound sexual engagement with, otherwise invisible deities. So you take on what's called a yidam. You take on an energy and engage with it. So I think that that's entirely possible. What I don't know, I feel good about for anybody is the idea of not circulating that energy. That's where I get a little bit, I don't know if that's good. That to me would be like me saying, you know, I do believe fire isn't real and it burns, you know, that where maybe you haven't heard that. It's my favorite expression. But, you know, this is all a dream. And inside of this dream, you really can suffer. Okay. So, yeah, you know, the Buddha, the whole idea of one taste is the Buddha, somebody ate food. They said the food was possibly poisoned or gross. And so the Buddha took that same food, stuck it in his mouth, chewed on it, and then gave it back to the person. And the food had become perfect ambrosia. And the idea is that whether or not something is healing or harmful isn't located in the thing itself. And that all of us have the power to develop the capacity to transform poison to medicine. That's what, and until the place, and what medicine is where everything has one taste, the taste of truth. What is the taste of truth? The taste of truth is the taste of joy and human flourishing. And that, so everything has that potential, no matter what it is. Now, so I do believe that, and I don't eat Cheetos. Or large quantities of sugar. And because I also live in the and it burns portion of reality. I live in the temporal reality as well as the infinite reality. So I pay attention to both. And so I take great care, and to the best of my ability, in both worlds. And I believe that they, you know, contribute to each other because they're the same thing ultimately. And so I would be remiss if I didn't, at a minimum, suggest that there be some form of active circulation of sexual energies, because that's your circulatory system. That's your energetic circulatory system and your access to wisdom. So that's my feeling on that. It doesn't have to necessarily be with someone, but I do believe there has to be some engagement, and there has to be some conception of other within that engagement. That's my feeling on that one. And if you have more thoughts or feelings, or if I hurt your feelings, or if you have an argument, you can let me know. Mark, is there a term for the positive nurturing aspect of fatherly male love, one that embodies strength, wisdom, and encouragement without the shadow of control? Mensch. Could although Karen, who's here, was voted Mensch of the Year, and she's a woman, for the wonderful challah bread that she makes. But okay, could this presence in men serve as a vital nutrient for women's liberation rather than a paradox of control? How do we name it, and how does it integrate with Eros? And this is what I'm going to say to you, Mark. I can tell by this question you have gotten your butt kicked, and I'm going to say, don't buy it. Don't buy it. Don't buy the bullshit that anything about your masculinity is, I hate this word, toxic or wrong or anything, period. It makes me sick when I see when I see these memes in the world. So and that's what happens. You know, this is why I say it's incumbent upon women, people, period, but women in particular, to draw that source of power, that locus of power back here. Because if you don't, you're constantly seeking out here for a happiness that can never deliver. Only this can deliver happiness, okay? Only this can deliver happiness. And if I'm seeking out here in any way, for happiness, it will eventually disappoint me. And that disappointment can be translated to the word resentment. So then what ends up happening is I subtly and not so subtly bite you for not doing what you could never do. There's no way that you could ever make me happy, ever. No matter if you gave until the end of time every last drop of blood, you could not make me happy if I didn't choose to be happy. You just can't. But here's the other good news. You also can't make me unhappy. There is nothing. And this one I have tested, those who know my life circumstances right now. There is nothing anybody could do to make me unhappy. And this is why I began with Traben Shorters, because that, if we want to teach people something, if we want to have a true social justice, what we want to have is an aspiration-based social justice that doesn't objectify people by what they're lacking, because that is the source of unconditional happiness. That's it. There's only one way to unconditional happiness, is to be happy in all conditions. And so you have to begin to train the mind to be happy in all conditions. Everything else is a shortcut. People, by the way, abuse this expression, spiritual bypass. They don't know what it means. In the ways that I've seen it used, they definitely, having feelings is not a spiritual bypass, and not having feelings is not a spiritual bypass. It's intent, intent, intent. For example, I'm in the middle of this harrowing life experience for 7 years, but really in the past year and a half with the government. And I don't have time for a lot of feelings. That's not where I am climbing. I'm rock climbing. And when you're rock climbing, all you can focus on is where you put your hand next, where you put your hand next, that is skillful in that moment. And then when I go to the land sometimes and I'm not rock climbing for a brief period of time, I just sob, and that is skillful. And so you can't judge by the outside what a spiritual bypass is. It's whether or not somebody is internally doing the work of meeting the moment. So I just want to say that, because that just drives me. When I see people, it's just a spiritual bypass. No, you just learned that word the way a 2-year-old learns the F word, and you're using it all the time. Don't do that. I don't even know what I was talking about, but boy, I meant what I was just talking about. I'll come back to it. What was I talking about? Huh? Oh man, I love you guys. And so that one of the reasons I love you so much. I talk about that experience where you see something that isn't obvious in culture. Where you see through a certain veil, and then once you see through it, it is devastating, and you can't ever unsee it, is the expression, right? And so you have to feel the heartbreak with that particular group of people, or whatever it is. And I was very careful to write a lot about the experience of privilege and white male experience, and the illusion of privilege. I am of the deep-seated belief that that suffering is equally distributed through all human beings, and expressing differently in each human being, which isn't to say that there aren't cultural pathologies that we need to amend. There are, but I want to be clear that suffering is not dependent on those pathologies. Otherwise, you imprison people. But so I remember, and one of the reasons why it's not seen is you don't have enough women in their power. You don't have enough women who know their own value. That you don't have enough women who aren't seeking outward for happiness in a way that has demand or expectation. And if you don't have that, then it becomes a given that all, of course, the responsibility should fall on men. And because it's impossible, men are constantly and chronically failing. And to live in that paradigm constantly with the biological drive to produce and please, producing, that's really the biological drive that's located inside of the biological male body, we'll say, okay? I don't know how, the alterations that you can do, but I can just say that one piece. And so to have this drive against this perception, constantly living up against that wall, there's an expression, there's this idea about learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is if you have an animal and you give it a task and you don't give it a way to win, enough times it just quits. It just goes, it's a type of paralysis. And so I think what we're seeing in our culture with so many men is a learned helplessness. Although you guys are such freaking champions, you still keep going. I mean, I would have just been like, fuck you. But and this is also, and then you're all doing it on a, what is that? Calorie deficient, is that what they call it? Diet of Eros, and you're trying to get whatever tiny drop from porn you can. And it's, let me tell you this, it's a tiny, tiny drop, like a cactus, just to survive. And it's heartbreaking to me. That's my feeling about men. So first of all, is there a term for the positive nurturing aspect of fatherly male love, one that embodies strength, wisdom, and encouragement without the shadow of control? And I would say that is man, period. And that is man prior to emotional, psychological castration and starvation. So there you go. That's my feeling on that one. And this is one of the reasons why, I was willing to take the wrath of Instagram about my little Bonnie Blue, because she was willing to feed people. She is like the Mother Teresa of Eros. I'm joking. That might be taking a little bit far. I love her though. So just so you know, she's a woman who broke the Guinness Book of World Records for having sex with 1,000 men in 12 hours, 1,029 men. And everyone has their, I would say they have their Eros deficit view of what happened. But to my mind, in the video that I played of her, what she said was, how could I be so rich? How could I have so much pleasure in my body and not share it with people? It's just like, that's right, Bonnie. And I could tell you, the more she does that, the less we'll hear this question. And because two things will happen, well, three things will happen. I'll tell you what'll happen. If there were more Bonnie Blues, which, if certain authorities have their way, there won't be. That's what I would like to see in the world, is more erotic bodhisattvas, erotic, generous women. Then the first thing you would see is, just period, you would see a male world set right. Because what you see is an erotic deficit in men. And so greed, hatred, and delusion are what arise when there is an erotic deficit. So you would just see simple making right, just a basic nourishment. We have people who are starving, and then you give them some food, and then they don't have good impulse control with it, and then you say, see, they shouldn't have any food. No. You figure out how to feed people in a way while they're concurrently learning to work with those impulses, so that they can begin to be nourished and actually control the impulses and then use it for good. So the first thing you would just see is a world set right, period. And then you would see men who There's this great quote by Catherine McCune where she says, men love to do, but more than loving to do, they love to do for, which I think is such a pretty way of looking at it. That place where they have an assigned author or a muse, we'll say, who draws out their greatness. And so what you would see is men who, we always talk about these men and their, I guess I'm going to talk about men today. These men and their fragile egos. And it's like, yeah, they're porous from lack of nutrient. Yeah, of course. Starving people have fragile egos. That's just, they're reactive. That's how it tends to work. And so, so then you would see men, I believe, rise to their highest. And so what we try to do as a culture is beat men. Either we try to beat them into their highest, or nitpick them to their highest, criticize them to their highest, or we try to take it out of the sacred realm and monetize themselves to the highest. Neither work. And really all you do is you give men, as far as I can tell, this is my experience, you give them the basic nutrients they need, and a little bit of, a little to the left, a little to the right, and it's natural. In Buddhism, the idea is that all things self-liberate, all things nourished self-evolve. It's our nature. There's a Buddha inside of each of us. It just needs certain nutrients, like those, those little rocks, and then you drop in water and they turn into a castle. I don't know if you had those when you were a kid, but I did. It's like that. That's you just need to get them saturated in some Eros, and they become profound. So that's what you would see. You would see men rise to their highest. And then the third thing that would happen, which is great, is if you had women who had a model of erotic bodhisattvahood that was being expressed in the world, women are so competitive that what you would find is just wildly generous women. And we would actually, we would be competing for the right thing. We wouldn't be competing like crabs in a barrel for this little scarcity of, this dishwasher and sorry, maybe some of my views come out here, but like this little tiny life, what you would see is these women who, I always say women are thoroughbreds, and but the nature of a thoroughbred is they're the most difficult to get moving, but once you get them to move, then they are the most the word isn't obedient, but they're the most imperfect response to an excellent rider. That's what I'll say. And right now we just have a really shitty rider. Right now we have feminism riding us, and it is just terrible, because you have this rider that's just constantly saying, you are not at fault. You are bad, though. You don't have to be responsible for your own happiness in any way. And it's just like riding you and beating you, instead of saying, hey, you have the keys to the queendom. That's yours. You were born with that. That was your birthright. You don't have to go looking for it. It's right there. That's yours. That would be a good rider. And then, how do I do it? How do I do it? That's the favorite question on Instagram. How do I do this thing that you write about? Well, how you do it is you just determine that you're going to be for. You're going to be for. Right now we have everything is against. You just determine you're going to be for everyone you encounter. You're going to be for your partner. You're going to be for everyone's liberation. Period. It's not that hard, including yours. Including yours. Just the method of being for your own liberation tends to be being for everyone's liberation, because you hit that trippy place of fire isn't real and it burns, you're also everybody else. So it's just a very simple but difficult game. And so then what you do is you figure out how to offer. You offer what's most needed. You look at what's most needed. You know, I'm in Harlem. What is most needed in Harlem? Well, I'll tell you, good food is what is most needed. They did all of this research in prisons. You know what they found? They found that when you start giving incarcerated people good food, less sugar, then you decrease violence by 60%. This part was shocking to me. If you give them the equivalent to a multivitamin, 90%. So you come into Harlem and it is what is referred to as a food ghetto. What that means is there is not health food available for a certain number of blocks inside of this area. So you think about it and you think about, oh my God, all that's available are carbs and sugar. And then you expect people to be grounded, happy, clear, and focused. And whoa, it doesn't happen. Oh, that's them. They're so bad. So you start looking at what's actually needed, not what you want to give them, what's needed. What would provide, what resources are needed here? What resources are needed on the Upper East Side? On the Upper East Side, I see some images of some big booties are needed on the Upper East Side. But you go, wherever you go, you look at what is called for here, what would be of benefit here, and then you do your best to provide it. Well, I can tell you that as a woman, when I look out at the world, it looks to me like what's needed is Eros. If I saw something else, I promise you, if I studied, I've practiced Buddhism for 30 years. If I thought that was enough, just, basic human compassion, which is not basic at all, by the way. And I want to make sure that there's 5 faces of it: peace, increase, power, wrath, and activity. So I don't mean like compassion. I mean like compassion as well. If I believed that were enough, I'd be more than happy to just don my robes and do that. I just don't think it's enough at this point in history. So I would just look at like, oh, okay, what's needed? Oh, Eros. Well, how do I become a fount of Eros? How do I become, in this desert, some kind of water? What do I do? And what does that path look like? And some of you may know, this is very controversial. My path looked like a path for a period of time of what's called unconditional sex. And that was where I had sex with a different person every day. And I did it both in terms of practicing equanimity to decrease my preferences and my equivalent to 1,000 prostrations. My 100,000 prostrations, in order to offer what I had to the best of my ability and to break all of these patterns that kept me from being in flow perpetually in the most challenging preference-directed environment that exists. I don't think there's anything where you're more like, oh no, that doesn't turn me on. I don't like that. Or, not that person. Oh, bad breath. I'm a Virgo. I have all of those, all of the caveats. So, that was for a long time, that was my practice. Also because these women that I was around would say, I can't get turned on. There's no one available. And I would be like, well, let me check it out. Oh, go outside of your house, honey. They're available. And so, but I had to know for myself what the truth was, because I had to walk my talk. What is the truth of what is available, and what did I have to go through? Oh my gosh, you want to talk about not living with an audience. The imagined audience of being that woman was very intense, and having to know who I was in the process. So you go through that whole thing, and then you come out, and anytime you come out of emptiness, you come out with a souvenir. And my souvenir was that I could talk to other women about this experience and what's possible for them, and if they were interested. I also came out with enough emptiness inside of me that I can be patient, which is a big deal, because I don't care what anybody does. You know, my job. Yeah, I don't. How about that? I don't care what you do. But I care that I do my job. You know, my job is to make available every single resource that I have to anybody who wants it, and to not go knocking on the door of anybody who doesn't. That's my job as best I can tell, and then to design structures that make more of that possible in the world. That's my particular dharma. But yeah, and so then it's to come back and say, hey, all those things, ladies, that we thought in college, you really get in trouble if you use the word lady. It's a very chauvinistic word. But all those things that are impossible, all those things we say are impossible, and I could never do that. I said to my attorney, she heard about unconditional sex, and I said, you really discover what it's like to have merging of a soul with somebody who is definitely not your preference. And she went, you are a better woman than I. So the place where there are just infinite things that it couldn't because of this. I couldn't. And if there is a mantra for, for women at this point in history, it's I can't. That is, I don't, that's what I see. And I see an entire culture, an entire society more than willing to reinforce that idea and to come in and save us from ourselves, which I think is, again, back to Traven Shorter. So that is my thoughts on 2 questions. Okay.
That was wonderful. Thank you. We'll take a few reflections. If you're online, you can raise your virtual hand, or if you're in the room, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you. We'll start with Josie online.
Hey, Nicole.
Josie.
I just want to emphasize how much I appreciate how you answered Mark's question. Because it just has the flavor from him and from myself, and I think a lot of guys of like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with the situation? And you bring so much compassion and care that I feel like myself and like all men, we just can like relax around you and relax in this environment with our friends, because like, oh, they all see me as I know that you see me how you see me, and that's really important for men. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I can't see your name, but with your hand up, Mark.
Oh, Mark.
Hi. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Got it. Thank you so much for answering my question and for calling out the value of the nutrient of Eros that would help move the energy. Because so much of this for me, and I know as someone who does a lot of men's work, who are working with men, as to how do we resolve our relationship with the post-feminist hangover and what ignited men are and how to be there. Recognizing that there's this deficit of erotic nutrient, and then I'm trying to fulfill it with the wrong kind of nutrients. And then while I'm trying to get the right nutrients, I'm still deserving.
Yeah, that's right.
That's so powerful. And it's really helpful to be in alignment with where we all want to go together to resolve this patriarchal hangover that we're having.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait, 1 second. Yeah. There's this point where I can't remember. It was a conversation with the Dalai Lama, and somebody asked some question about how do I become a good person, and he said, "Bad people don't ask that question." They're just by the very nature of your question and your quest, and so.
Appreciate you. I feel warm inside.
Yeah, good. I'm glad.
Thank you. We'll end with one from Instagram from Maya Tress. She said, "So much wisdom. I'm drinking water from a glorious fire hose."
Oh, thank you. Beautiful. All right. I think I'm back on Tuesday. What's today? Saturday. Yeah. So I'm going to Monday. Yeah, I'm back on Tuesday.